Seb, what's your definition today of wealth management?
It seems that the industry is sort of at the moment settling on wealth management broadly because it incorporates not just the asset management side but the banking. And from a broader sense of definitions, that's clearer than private banking, which often implies the banking, and there are a lot of institutions that say they're private banks that don't offer banking or don't pursue banking, which is confusing to clients because why would you have the name? And actually from a license perspective it's also perhaps not accurate. So wealth management is much broader. Neither has been fully understood by the industry. What is much clearer now because of broad advertising, you cannot go anywhere in the world now without seeing some reference to this industry easily. That more and more people are becoming familiar with the phrase. Movies will have references to wealth management and private banking. Airlines will have it. Radio stations will have it. Shows, everything. So it's clearly in the lexicon of normal financial markets. But what people haven't yet understood is who is it for, and that's the work that needs to be done. And it's a big brand issue right now, and one that we as an industry have a responsibility to get right and invest in. And sadly, the industry doesn't invest very well in brand.
What do you mean banks don't invest in their brands?
If you look globally at all of the banks, if you firstly accept the premise that private banking and wealth management is fundamentally a consumer business, financial service consumer business. If you look at any other consumer industry and you say, well, how is your business organized? How big a marketing team do you have? How big a branding expenditure? How much R&D do you have? You can see ratios that are much, much higher than private banking. I'll give you an average that most of the private banks, global private banks, will have marketing teams of less than 20, perhaps even less than 10 worldwide. So they may be managing 200, 300, 400, 500 billion or more, but their marketing team, which is, and again, they'll think of marketing as purely events and cocktail sticks, which is just so primitive and in a way offensive to the principle, but also clearly why the business of the industry is missing its opportunity. So you've got a business industry that's spending less than 1% of its total revenue on any elements of business creation through the market and brand. There are some exceptions to that. The exceptions are probably the top 5 global private banks, but those are pretty much driven by their domestic franchises, not by their international businesses. I have yet to see the same scale of investment in the marketing and branding and communication side that I would see in structured products derivatives section. And every relationship manager, Salesforce person will yell at me and say that's because that's where we make the money. They fail to realize that actually they also make the money in the marketing and the brand. Any customer research we do shows that the top reason why people choose a bank is the brand.
In Asia, the investment piece is a very small part of the family's wealth. Do private banks need to think differently about the value they add to clients, and can they monetize that?
A lot of financial institutions, either in Asia or anywhere around the world, in fact, will start to go off on a really eulogistic description of all of the other things that they can do for the private client, all of which are very important, all of which we've researched, and for many of those propositions we've helped to develop. But they've never costed it. So it seems a bit shallow to the wealthy individual when they say all of these things that matter. So we'd like to talk to you about the succession, we'd like to teach your kids about being better people, we would talk about philanthropy and blah, blah, blah. And then when they sit down and they say, so how are we going to pay for it? No, we're not going to charge you for that. That's okay, because obviously you're going to have a financial portfolio with us. So it's almost like you have to put money with them as a hostage in order to get the things that you actually matter most. And what's really, really interesting is, again, from the customer research, is clients will say, I'll pay for those skills because you probably have those skills. But I want to pay for those explicitly. I don't want them to be segregated or wrapped up into something that I actually don't really want from you, which is the portfolio. Or if I did want the portfolio, I'd like it to be judged on its own merits, not because I'm doing other things with you. So that's probably one way, because I often hear this type of question being asked in the industry, and everyone then goes on to a long emotional sort of piece about how it's really great when you work with billionaire families and you keep them together because in 3 generations they're going to be with no money at all. Well, firstly, that happens at every level of wealth. It isn't just with billionaires. So let's be clear, it's an emotional issue. And secondly, it isn't really clear that the industry has got the equipment to help those clients, particularly on the psychological side, which they say they want to do. And thirdly, they're not charging for it, which they should do. Because if they had any good value, that would be demonstrated that they could charge for it. The fact they don't charge for it suggests they don't have any good value, which means there's an issue.